When Paul and I were looking at the wealth of information that these gentlemen were presenting today, we went back and forth on what could we possibly add to this dialogue. What we recognized was, as we looked at some of the key topics that were discussed today, was there's some very important things that these guys have given some recommendations around risk assessments, incident reporting, policy management, investigations and proper procedures around them. But one of the most important, and really one of the ones that we've seen from talking to organizations that hasn't had as much attention paid to it, is awareness and training. And that is an area where we do have a fair amount of experience. Ben talked about establishing tone at the top. Martin talked about establishing an ethical culture and the need for training and awareness. Neil, the unflappable Neil, talked about producing understandable policies and effective training. So certainly one of the more visible things that an organization can put in place is to have communications and training that support these initiatives. One of the things that we've recognized over the past 30 years of doing business, and actually Martin spoke to this, is a strong ethical culture does a lot for an organization. So here's some statistics that you can read, but it not only helps from a compliance standpoint, but it also helps do things like reduce misconduct and increase stock price. It increases the likelihood that people are going to come to the organization and stay within the organization, and the fact that they are empowered and motivated to do the right thing. It means when you have a program like this in place, some of the things that you can point to see, wow, this is a program that is working, is that your employees understand the specific behaviors around bribery and other issues. So it's going to be critical when you're rolling these types of programs out to have very specific, company-specific examples of what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. Some of it's tough right now to figure out what is the scenario and where you point your employees. But as the continued explanation of these rulings come out, this is going to be important for you to clarify and promote on an ongoing basis to your employees. It must be visible to all constituents, so not just your employees, but the people that are representing you in the field, your vendors, your contractors. There's a number of different groups that could be affected by this. Management also needs to be very aware of what their role is in this process. That is something that we've seen over the years in any type of communication program, is that the management group is often forgotten, and you have to be clear about what their role is in the rolling out of a campaign like this, and what they're supposed to say when people come to them to ask these types of questions. So what we've done is we've broken it out into 5 different core components, and I'm going to touch upon each of them over the next 10 minutes or so in closing. So one of the things that we recognize is a very core component of any communication campaign is the need for printed material. So there is weight in printing things and handing them out. So when you're looking at rolling out communications around the new Anti-Bribery Act, you need to think about what policies, procedures are you going to put in the hands of the employees. You want to give information to your management. You want to roll out materials to your employees. So that could be posters in the break room, it could be new hire brochures or kits, but things that, as people are brought on board into your organization, that they understand what the expectations are. So these are a couple of examples of printed pieces that we have produced for other organizations that you could consider as you're looking at implementing in yours. The code of conduct is something else. We were in a meeting yesterday with an organization talking about the importance of not just establishing an anti-bribery policy and incorporating it into the code, but is this an opportunity to redesign the code and to roll it out as a whole to the organization, and making sure that it conveys that top-down support and guidance. It should be where you set the tone from the top and the foundation for your ethics and compliance program, communicating expected and inappropriate behaviors. We have certainly seen over the years where there's been a trend going from the old traditional 12-page Word document of a code of conduct to creating a more lively, engaging document that people actually use, that people reference if they have questions about what am I supposed to do here. So going from legal jargon to more engaging, relevant jargon, making it easier to access on the intranet, easier to access in a printed version if that's appropriate for your organization. So here are a couple of examples that have been produced that really demonstrate these types of approaches. Cisco is a good example. They actually won a few awards for the work that we did for them around their code, putting things in place like real-life scenarios, decision trees, things like that in their code. And creating many times an abridged version for frontline employees. So there could be deeper training done around anti-bribery for certain employees, but everybody might need to know about it at least high level, and so producing a brochure or an abridged version is a tactic often used. Electronic communication obviously is becoming more and more relevant these days, and again, depending upon your constituents and your employee base, may be more relevant in some places than others, but it should be an integral part of any communication strategy. So one of the things that we are seeing is people are really looking at this as a time to reintroduce their code of conduct as a whole, and maybe rebrand their compliance department around this anti-bribery concept. So the branding on the intranet, creating landing pages for employees when they come to give them information about anti-bribery or about other important ethical topics or issues, and considering the application and the tool that they're going to actually access this information. So with Apple, we rolled out a program that we had to consider the fact that they were going to access it on their iPad. So we had to do some different things, and they actually have a very nice program that has a lot of information that provides them details on their gift policy and with ready awareness. Readily accessible awareness that's distributed on a periodic basis. They have access and links to training where they're supposed to go and learn about. In their case, they called it sketchy situations. They have access to resources, so the business conduct policy, managers' specific resources, the actual business conduct. And if you have questions and you want to know if I'm supposed to report this, here's some information that is conveyed to the employee base. One nice thing they also did was they included frequently asked questions on their site. So if an employee has a question about, I'm abroad, I have this issue occurring, what am I supposed to do? It can be presented on your intranet site and readily available to your employees. Finally, and this has been mentioned a number of times, that documented training must be incorporated. This is an extreme example. Yahoo's a client, and they wanted to do something funky, edgy around their code of conduct. But we created some relevant, engaging training that their employees liked. So we took what was typically boring training that they had seen in the past and made it more relevant. So I encourage you, as you're thinking about rolling out this anti-bribery procedures, how are you going to make this memorable and something that's going to stick with your employee base? Another example, a little bit more corporate, but another example that we put together for Coca-Cola Hellenic. I believe this is who this is for. And the having an LMS in place where you can track the training is going to be a critical piece when you are called to the carpet and need to show your documentation around who's been trained, who hasn't. Having an LMS tool in place to show this is a key recommendation. Finally, incorporating social media. I actually considered taking this one out because it's a little further out there, and it's new in the concept of creating awareness and training in the world of ethics. But I actually saw on the BBC this morning that Facebook now is up to 500 million users. 1 out of every 14 humans on this planet is a Facebook user. And they're coming out with a new technology that they think is going to replace email. So that concept really points to the fact that you need to consider, or can consider, using social media as a way to continue to communicate to your employees about issues like anti-bribery and other ethics and compliance issues. Some other statistics here. that I found interesting that points to the fact that it is not going away, especially as we bring on more and more Gen Y employees into the workforce. One of the nice things about it is it's easy to do. It's easy to get information out virtually immediately. So if you have a topic or an issue or a change in policy, you need to get it out quickly. You can Twitter that to certain people. You can use Yammer. You can build a Facebook page. There's things like that. Again, we're just starting to touch upon it at the network, but we're starting to see companies doing things like that as a way to supplement ongoing awareness and training. So as you look at these 5 components, consider them as you are trying to build out your adequate procedures. Printed materials, your code of conduct, electronic materials, documenting the training, and potentially incorporating social media. What do you do now as you look at going forward, and you start to build out your procedures, and you want to decide how you're going to communicate it to your audiences? The first thing you do is exist what is out there today. Do you have an LMS tool? Do you have a newsletter that you could leverage? Look at what is in place today and see if there's things that you can leverage or things that you want to stay away from in terms of building a communication strategy. Understand the demographics of your employees. Age, race, the education level, all those things go into how you communicate things like this important act to your employee base. You want to create memorable messaging. I spoke to this earlier, but not just the same old boring, here's a Word document, sign off on the bottom. It's something that's going to have some hooks in it and create some awareness around the topics or issues. It also this is not an event, but a campaign. So there has to be a plan around ongoing communications on these types of subjects. And looking at a multimedia approach is certainly a recommendation that we would encourage. So we didn't have a lot to add, but we did at least want to get that in as something else to think about as you're starting to put your procedures in place ahead of next April.